Hey everybody, I am here with the creator of one of my favorite games, Tom Happ. How you doing?
Hello.
So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you, and I really think people are going to enjoy hearing directly from the creator of, in my opinion, genuinely one of the best Metroidvanias out there ever. Not modern, just one of my favorite ones that I've ever played. So thank you for making something so amazing.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
The special edition of the game, the first one came with like a DVD or something, I believe, with a full interview and a backstory and all of that stuff. So, I don't think everybody listening is going to have heard that. So maybe we could just kind of go over your origin story a little bit, just to bring everybody up to speed on this. But you made the first Axiom Verge all by yourself, including the graphics and the music and everything, right?
That's right.
So, how does somebody even start to begin an undertaking like that? Have you done game design in the past? Are you a professional musician? Or
I was a game developer. I was a programmer. I had been a programmer and an animator at various points in my career. I worked for EA and I worked for Petroglyph Games, and I had also basically always been like working on my own hobby projects the whole time. Even before, even when I was in college, I was doing that kind of thing. So no, I was never a professional musician, and I don't have any like real music training. I took a class once in MIDI um, in college, and that's about the extent of my professionalism as far as music goes. Yeah, I'm definitely a imposter when it comes to music.
well, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about any kind of art is if somebody likes it, you've won. It doesn't really matter. There is no such thing as an imposter. If you made something people like, that's it. It's for real. So, I think the music is one of the things that you know a really good game doesn't need the best music, but having good music with it just adds so much to the atmosphere and the ambiance of everything, and especially especially when different parts of a game have a different feel just in gameplay, and then you change the music to match that. When you were writing the music for Axiom Verge 1, and I guess 2 as well, did you always have that in mind of, as you're designing a level, you had a feel for the music, or did one come first?
Usually the like I had an idea of what the music would be, but generally I did the level design first, and and then to some degree, like I would do the artwork for the levels first, and then um, I would come up with the music that I thought should go with that artwork, and then when I was actually developing the game, or like doing the game design and putting it all together, I would a lot of times be like, I don't think this song fits with this one, and end up switching a couple of tracks here and there. So by the end, they might not be the original tracks that I had planned.
That's pretty cool, though. I mean, the fact that you kind of had a sense of where you're going through it. I mean, you could definitely tell. I don't. I'm terrible with names. I don't remember any song names and anything like that. But I remember the different parts of the game. There was one that had a very distinctive feel to it, in Axiom Verge 1, and in the second one, the music. I liked how it was kind of different versions of the same song depending on what part of the area that you were in and all of that stuff. It was very cool that you had the vision of the feel of the song as you're going through all that. And um so I guess between the two games, did you do anything differently from a composition point of view, both in music and in level design for the second one? Because I thought the first one you nailed the formula, and I was wondering, is the second one going to be like just an extension of the first, which would have been fine, but it definitely had a slightly different feel because of the drone mechanics and everything.
Yeah, like I for the second game, I had a choice of like whether I should just sort of like reskin the first game, and sort of like make, basically like a ROM hack of the first game, which is what a lot of sequels seem to be. Or I could make something different. And I was so tired of the first game that for the second one, I was like, well, let's see how different I can make it and still be part of the same universe, and still feel like the same, uh, like it belongs, with the Axiom Verge name. So uh, that's kind of was my philosophy there. And I was thinking about like, what game sequels should I use as my reference? And like, if you think of, uh, like for example, like in Tomb Raider, the sequels are kind of like reskins of the original. Um, they did a reboot, and then the reboot sequels were kind of like the same as the original but in different locales. But then there's series like Zelda where like the second game is a side scroller. It's completely different from the first one. Um, Super Mario Brothers 2 is not even a Mario game to begin with. So it's completely different. But even then, like Mario 3 and Mario 4, they change so much about them with like the raccoon suit and the cape. Uh, and I thought it would be better to take that route where like I basically change as much as I can and gets some depth so that if people feel like uh they need to play an Axiom Verge 1 type of game, they can play Axiom Verge 1. And Axiom Verge 2 would be a whole different thing and not just like a repeat.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense because you don't really the stories tie in, but you don't need to play one in order to play two. So it's a perfect fit that way. It's not like you have to go through the evolution. You could just kind of pick up either one, but the story is pretty incredible. So I hope people do play them in order just to get that sense of it. Uh,
Yeah. That was kind of the idea. I knew that like with indie games, basically like 99% of people haven't played your game always. So, uh, I did that. That was also another thing I was thinking of, was like, how can I make this game be kind of independent from the first game so that people can pick up one or the other and not feel like they missed out on something.
that makes sense. No, when you were porting the game to different platforms, so starting out, the game I think was released on PlayStation 4 originally and PC, right? And then
Axiom Verge 1 was,
yeah,
yeah.
and then it eventually got released on the Wii U and then the Switch with the Multiverse Edition. Was there a different set of tools to write the second one? And then when you ported it to all these different platforms, was it, I'm not a programmer, I'm just kind of a general nerd. So I'm always very curious as, do you have to learn a completely different skill set every time you port it to a different platform? Or, how do you kind of go about doing that?
Um, so it's going to be different for each game, I think. Axiom Verge is written using C Sharp and uh, a set of libraries called Monogame. And those are they're they're sort of like they're written to be portable, but it means that uh, someone needs to port those libraries over first because I don't have that ability. And uh, so for like the Vita and the Nintendo Switch, I hired Sickhead Games to do the ports. Actually, Sony hired Sickhead Games to do the Vita port, and Sickhead Games came up with this system that can basically cross-compile C# to C++, and then they were able to take that and use that to create a compiler that also worked for Xbox and Nintendo Switch, and they later got it working with PlayStation 4 too, which it didn't have that at the time that I did it. So it's kind of like you don't have to repeat most of what you do, but there's always like a whole bunch of pretty like detailed, annoying little things you need to change for each platform. And thankfully for me, most of that is on the shoulders of Sickhead or whoever is porting the game engine, the monogame code. Um, but there's still stuff that like usually there's a problem with the shaders or you know the way games are saved or the way like trophies are handled or and that thing will change from platform to platform.
That makes sense.
So you always need to spend like a couple of months fixing up those differences.
That was going to be my next question: is how long per platform does it usually take to make sure the port went over correct and to fix it? Is it a couple of months?
It depends. Like for instance, right now, Sickhead is making the PlayStation 5 version of Mono games, so we can have Axiom Verge 2 be on PlayStation 5, and like it's basically getting those graphics libraries because they're not the same as PlayStation 4. So he's trying to get everything nailed down, and that's taken a couple of months for him just to do that. And that's before even having the game running. And once he has the game running, like then there's going to be another, I would expect like a couple of months where we're like trying to get the new controller features and any changes to the trophy system and whatever else nailed down. And it's there's something like that for every platform.
That makes sense. The one thing that I definitely noticed between the 3 playthroughs that I did, Wii U, Switch for the first one, and then Switch for the second, is I never once had a problem with controller latency. And I even found out I was testing out a new controller when I was playing Axiom Verge 2, and I didn't have any problems whatsoever, and I switched over to a different game and went, wait a minute, this controller's got like 2 or 3 frames of latency. How come I didn't notice with Axiom Verge? So what did you do, or did you even have controller latency in mind? Because however the game is programmed, it's snappy and it felt great no matter what controller I ended up using.
Yeah, it's down to, I think, like the core engine, like how, however Mono game is implementing it at heart. So like, that layer it's pretty minimal. It has stuff to like read the joysticks, and then it's up to me to like do what I do with them. And I don't put any, there's no latency game side between that. It's always 60 frames per second. And yeah, so there won't be a delay there. There are sometimes, like for instance, in the PlayStation 4, when I remember during development, I had the rendering set up to like render immediately without even like waiting. There's like you're actually supposed to, before you like render the screen, like swap the back buffer over, and I was not. There was some error in there where it wasn't doing that, and I actually like ended up having to delay a frame, or I guess the default behavior is to delay a frame from what you're doing. But before I did that, when the player jumped around, like the drill and like the bullets and other effects would be like 1 frame behind. They'd always be lagging behind the guy, because actually the input was happening faster than the rendering was happening. So, I know that there's at least 1 frame of latency just because of that.
I mean, that's actually very fast for a modern game. 1 frame of buffered latency for that. I've seen it all over the place, and there's some people who do controller latency tests for modern fighting games, and it's very strange to see the wide swings between consoles and how much latency there is. And for a game like this, that's something that, a lot of the people that would play this were probably people that also played other Metroidvania styles, and all of the consoles that didn't have a frame buffer built in, it was just direct video output. You're used to those snappy controls, and you're not, any kind of lag would mess with a lot of people anytime they're doing some kind of jumping or planning your moves, and I just never felt that in any of the Axiom Verge games.
Yeah, well, they're meant to, feel like a traditional console where it's all in ROM, and the thing is just pretty much constantly rendering. You have no control over when it outputs to the screen because it's always going to do it um, at exactly the same point in the vertical refresh cycle. So, I tried to make it feel like that as much as I can.
Yeah, well, you succeeded. I'm very sensitive to input lag, so you definitely succeeded in that one. Um, Now, how did you end up choosing the resolution of the game? Was it to fit a mobile screen? Or was it just the retro style that you wanted to choose?
Um, yeah, the resolution is always difficult with anything with pixel art because if it doesn't divide evenly into the display scale, you will get artifacts and you'll see like pixels shifting size as you're running along and you're scrolling. So like Axiom Verge 1 got its resolution from the Vita's resolution because I knew going into it that it had to work on the Vita. So um, it was some multiple of that. I can't remember. It was like 472 by 544 or something. No, what am I thinking? 960 by 540. Um,
I forgot what it was as well. I'd been
anyway,
doing some experiments with playing it on CRTs, so I remember finding out exactly what it was for that reason. But
yeah, yeah. So it was some multiple of that, and then that divided easily into HD, but not so well into 720p. Um, and then on Nintendo Switch, uh, which is 720p, I was afraid it was gonna look wrong. So what we tried to do at first was to scale the game in the software to 720p first, and like come up with like some intelligent scaling algorithm, and it looked horrible. So then we were just like, I guess we're just outputting at 1080p, and the Switch does what it does. And when you do it that way, it looks fine. I don't know how it does, like what kind of mathematics they're doing in there to make it look, but it looks way better than if you scale it yourself. So, and then for Axiom Verge 2, there wasn't a Vita in there, so I was like, well, maybe I can get it to look even better on the Switch. So then I based everything on the Switch's resolution. Like once I found out what it was, because I was actually already developing the game uh, before the Switch came out, and um, waiting to find out what the specs were. And then once they were once they were out, I made it basically a third of what 720p is. So it was like 436 by 240. Um, and then that has the inverse problem. It doesn't scale up to 1080p perfectly. So I have the option to put a border. But if you have 4K and you're on a PlayStation Pro or higher that can do that, then it fits perfectly and it doesn't need the black border.
yeah, that resolution scaling is the bane of all retro gamers' existence who wants to play on a flat panel TV. So the website spends quite a lot of time talking about scalers. So I think everybody listening to this is
Yes.
going to feel your pain.
Yeah. 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 And like, not to mention like CRTs and 4:3 aspect ratio. I didn't even consider that because it's too much complexity to try to solve.
Yeah, so the games are both inherently 16 by 9, right?
They are. Yeah.
Because I did a couple of experiments playing them both on CRTs, and I always just put it in the 16 by 9 mode, so black bars on the top and bottom. And I'm lucky enough to have a
Mhm.
couple of widescreen CRTs because I'm a giant nerd, so I have a pile of them over
Yeah.
there, and it was
Oh
it
yeah.
was really cool.
There weren't too many of them. Like I had a Sony one like back in the day, and it was ginormous.
Yeah,
And it was only 30 inches, but it was like 100
I
pounds
don't know if you could see
over.
that, but that is my wall of CRTs over there. People, I'll try to drop a video in the chat, but yeah, I have everything from
Mm.
professional broadcast monitors to consumer grade and everything in between. And I was playing Axiom Verge on each one of the Axiom Verge 2 on each style at least, just to get a sense. And I was really
Mm.
impressed that like I loved all of them. Because there's some scenarios where, oh, this game definitely feels better on a CRT. Most N64 games are actually like that, in my opinion. But some
Mm.
games just felt more at home on a CRT. Others look way better on a beautiful OLED. And this one just looked great on all of them. I played it on a CRT. It felt like an old school game. I played it on the OLED. It felt like a modern game. It was just, it was very cool to see the artwork look the same, but so different on each type of display that you use it on. When you're thinking about pixel art and stuff like that, do you ever consider like OLED versus LCD, and I guess plasma for people that still has that, and how it would change, or do you kind of just keep like the 10-foot view of it's going to be a little bit different, so stick to my artistic intent?
Yeah, I don't worry about it too much. My computer monitors are calibrated however they're calibrated, and um, the closest I do is like I play test it on the Switch and make sure it looks good on that display, um, and that's that. That's my benchmark. And Yeah, and I mean I know it's going to look different on different displays, and there is some, I guess like magical whatever the raw RGB value is that I guess is the real way it is. That maybe there's some display out there that shows it according to whatever standard dictates how that should look. But I don't know what it is.
I mean, it looked great, so whatever you did, keep doing it. um, the other thing about pretty much all video games for me is if it has no story at all, but it's a fun game, I still enjoy it. But when it has a really good story, there's something about that. Like if I find myself not skipping through cutscenes or text, it at least in my opinion adds to the experience, and I really enjoyed the story of both. And you got real deep in there quite a few times for different subjects, and especially the multiverses and all of that. How did you even begin writing something like that, or is this just always a concept that you've kind of tooled around with when you were thinking and daydreaming?
It basically begins as an outline for me. I mean, I guess part of it is like me daydreaming, and then coming up with a general outline of like how I think the series of games should go, and I put in the history in there to keep my my writing consistent. Um, and it can be hard at times to like make sure like basic things that you wouldn't consider, like just making sure like why is this character there? Does it even make sense that this character is doing this thing? And Like figuring out like, oh, how do I make sure that this one character is in this one place at this right time, when like I also want this other thing to happen at this other time and they need to be there for that. And it can get convoluted, and I don't think I don't know, maybe there's some writer out there who can use a flowchart to figure that out easily, but for me it's basically a lot of like writing an outline, realizing things conflict with each other, um, changing it, or like sometimes I leave the things that were bad in the outline and I put a note like this can't happen because uh, if it did, then this character would have never done this other thing. So then that wouldn't have happened. So blah blah blah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. The concepts that you came, they seem like they're all based on a mixture of of different theories of science and kind of some different maybe religious beliefs. Maybe that's the wrong word to use, but you get pretty deep there. I mean, is that something that you always intended, or you just it kind of evolved that way as you envisioned this world, or worlds definitely I should say, and how they interact?
I mean, I definitely have my own like suspicions about uh, not religion, but I guess like the nature of physics and reality and that type of thing. And um, it felt like natural if I'm making a game to like put some of that stuff in there in a science fiction kind of way.
Hmm.
You know, uh, I think like I've had some people play the game and be like, "Oh, this game is about warning of the evils of science and technology and how they'll destroy everyone." But it's not really like that. It's
I
just
mean,
that
yeah, you
those
certainly
are
make a
the
great
topics that
point,
are
but it's not about
it's
that.
it's like those are the things that are interesting to me. So like that's how it comes to be in the game, as opposed to me like really trying to say like, oh yeah, like if you put too much, if we get too advanced in technology and an evil scientist is going to try and like take over the world with a pathogen that turns everyone into mutants.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I also always loved entertaining the thought of, what if the things that we know as deities are actually aliens or us from the future, or, I certainly don't watch the show Ancient Aliens and think it's fact, but I do like entertaining the idea of some of that stuff, and how you tied it into the storyline and all of that seemed really neat. It seemed very science fiction, but really routed in plausibility, in that as long as you believed that these worlds exist, this could actually interact like that.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. I try to make it consistent with itself. I I think it's pretty implausible that anything would ever happen really the way they happened in the game. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I've seen in at least two like reviews. I'm always ending up reading the reviews, and like people said the game had a lot of pseudoscience in it. And like when I think of pseudoscience, I think of like um, I don't know, like ancient aliens, like you said,
Yeah,
like Bigfoot, that type of
yeah,
thing. And yeah, and I was like, I think there's a difference between like science fiction and pseudoscience.
yeah.
Um,
There aren't even remotely close to the same thing. Pseudoscience is somebody who's claiming that their wild, unproven idea is fact, and science fiction is, hey, let's all get on board and pretend that this exists. But because it's science based, as long as we agree that this exists, all this other stuff is going to follow in a plausible manner. And yeah, they're not even close to the same thing. Huh.
yeah, so it's it would be cool if my ideas come out to be true in some way, minus the evil biomechanoid nanomachine monsters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I yeah, I'm not like trying to say this is how it is or has to be or any of those types of
Yeah,
things.
but science fiction
It's more
isn't doing
about
that.
the characters.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the characters themselves the whole time are pretty interesting. I love the first one where they're just dropped into that world. They don't know what's going on. And then, but the second one, it's much more intentional. I'm going to go there to find out what's happening. I'm going to be there. Now I'm stuck, but now I'm going to get out. Like they're also very human scenarios in that, once again, science fiction, as long as you adhere to the laws of the world that you're in. I mean, they're very human things to have happened, and fighting for your life. And that's why I always loved Super Metroid so much. I mean, Zelda: A Link to the Past is my second favorite game, but there's a lot of like, let's go visit the townspeople, and oh, isn't this some happy stuff? And Super Metroid, it's like everything's trying to kill you. You need to get off this planet and kill everything on there too. Like it's very cool. It's very
Right.
spooky, and I get
Yeah, you're feeling what Samus is probably feeling like as you're playing it.
exactly, and I definitely got that feeling throughout the first game. There's a little bit more interaction in the second, but there's also a lot more suspicion in the second. In that, hey, I wonder, is this a good character or a bad character? Are they going to help or are they going to turn on me? And it was pretty neat to have that as an aspect as well. I mean, I guess you had a little of that in the first one too, but it was just, I liked them both. They were just the same but different, I guess. And as are the games themselves, I felt like, and I don't mean this in a good way or a bad way. I just mean this kind of just flat, in that the both games were action exploration, Metroidvania, but the first one felt more action focused, and the second one felt more exploration focused. And I certainly love both of those. But was that intentional, or is that just kind of how it fell into place?
It was intentional, I like I said earlier, like I get tired of just doing the same old thing, and I think like in the first game, I was in a phase where I was having a lot of nostalgia for like old shoot 'em up games and run and gun games where there's like a lot of different weapons and they all have flashy effects and that type of thing. And then for the second game, I was more kind of feeling like in a relaxed state, like you know, thinking of having more of that nostalgia, but for like Horizon Zero Dawn or Breath of the Wild or something, where it's more like you're taking your time going through this world and you're exploring, but it's not like every second is uh intense combat, So, and I was, you have to pick like what you focus on when you're an independent developer. Like I can't really have it be all of the things at once. So I really did put most of my time into the exploration aspect.
Yeah, that was very cool. And a game's come together when you have a combination of it being challenging, but you want to go back to it. You don't just throw the controller down and go, this is bullshit. I don't even know how to get to this spot. Like, when you explore around and you try to get to a corner or a ledge or something. And that was especially one of the parts in the first Axiom Verge game where you could throw the drone and then teleport yourself there to get to that very high up ledge to get to the last part of the game. That was one of those things where every time I got to that section of the game, I'm going, how do I get up there? There's got to be a way. And then you finally get the power up and you're able to do it. It's such a satisfying feeling when you're able to figure out all the little hidden things in the game, both part of the main storyline and stuff that you totally don't need to beat the game, but it's neat to find if you get to that ledge or you get into that cave or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
How do you decide when you're making something like this what is mandatory and what's the extras? Because it's got to be, I mean, these things take you years to make, so it's got to get to the point where you're like, I don't want to put any more extras in, so enough with the extras. But you got quite a few in both.
Yeah. Uh, it's kind of like, even before I begin deciding what's in the game, I just I usually decide on what the key points are of the game. Not even knowing what they are, I actually just I create the map design and then I put markers of like this will require item one, this will require item two, this requires item three, and I put those little notes around without having decided on what those items are that you need. Um, and so then there might be, I don't know, like 15 to 20 items that you absolutely have to have, and then a bunch more things that are optional. And it's it's sort of like I think of those things that you have to have first, and then the optional ones are more like as I find that I have time to put them in there, I start putting them in. Um, and I by that I mean like all the extra weapons that you have in Axiom Verge 1. Um, like I think when I made them all, I just sat down for like a month and just made like 20 different weapons, one after the other, and didn't stop until I had them all. And Axiom Verge 2 was a little bit more like oh, I have some time, like I'll make a new type of axe. Um, they were more involved because the character you have to animate the motions for all the characters, each of their actions. So it takes longer and it's more intensive to make a new weapon in Axiom Verge 2. Um, I guess another thing I can say about it is uh, like you have to keep in mind like your characters like health and power and what the maximum is you want it to be, and like how much you want one unit to be worth, and that affects how many you find. Because if I'm like, the maximum power is, the character can have like 10 uh, segments of health or whatever that comes out to be, like 100, 10,000 health or 1,000 health. Um, and I just decide that each one of those things is 100, then it means I've only got 10 in there. But like for the skill tree, it's actually this kind of like exponentially increasing thing as you like add more and more skills to your skill tree. So in Axiom Verge 2, it wound up that to have these little skill nodes that you find, there had to be a lot more of them than there were like health nodes or power nodes in Axiom Verge 1. And that was kind of like just dictated by the skills that I wanted the character to have to be able to upgrade to.
Yeah.
Uh, and like at a certain point, I was like, I really shouldn't make any more skills because it's getting harder and harder to find a place to put each of these hidden nodes, and I try to get it so that every room in the game has some kind of purpose to it. But I was like starting to run out of rooms to be like where I'm going to put a hidden thing.
Yeah, and as a player, it's also it brings up an interesting question of, for somebody who's never played the game before, how do you know where to apply all of those nodes? And would it benefit you to go straight to the ability to unlock everything, or if you get to those areas, you need a lot of extra life anyway? So do you try to balance it and go through each? And I don't. I think once the gameplay switched over to drone, I just concentrated on filling up all of the power ups for the drone side of things, and then realized, oh yeah, I should be able to unlock other doors too. Let me go back and get some more for that. But when you planned that out, did you plan like a, if people figure it out, this is the best path to where to add the power ups in what order, or did you just kind of feel like, maybe it'll add a different element of gameplay depending on what people choose?
Um, yeah, it was more that I wanted to add more options. I like the idea of uh, the like the increasing of your hacking ability, um, as like having that be in like direct competition to your like mind real estate of whether you want to do that or the action based like damage and health and whatnot. Um, because like your hacking could lead you to more skill nodes to like make up for the fact that say that you spend like all of your skill nodes on the hacking, you might get some of them back because you did hacking. It allows you to defeat more enemies and open up more of those locked doors that are around and have powerful items behind them.
Good point.
And yeah, it wasn't that there was an ideal way that I thought people should do it. I just thought it would be fun to give people that option. Um, in some ways, people, I guess one of the main complaints people had is the game is too easy. So I sort of wish it had been like more of a compelling choice for the player, like where they're really sweating. Oh man, should I do hacking or should I put my skills in combat? Um, like maybe if I had made the combat more difficult, but it is what it is now. It's out there.
I'm not sure if calling the game easy is a fair statement, because there's certainly bosses that are not as challenging as the first, but the exploration and the puzzles and where to go and why to go there is pretty challenging. And once you get the flow, yeah, but anything, once you get the flow of it, gets to be much easier, right? Once you've memorized where to go in all of the areas of Super Metroid, the map is very easy, but getting there isn't. So I don't know if I agree with it, calling it an easy game, but it's certainly exploration focused, not battle focused. And if you don't like that, that's subjective. Maybe people just would prefer having a game where you blast everything in front of you, which I love those too. I just I kind of like how this one fell into place. um the other thing about the game that really impressed me is I often judge a game by how much I have to cheat. And one of the things that, and everybody's different. Or if you're used to certain types of gameplay, you would already think of it. But there was Twilight Princess, I think, where you aim the controller at the skull above one of the doors, and you're supposed to twist the controller around really fast to make it dizzy. I never figured out how to do that. I had to cheat because I was moving it around going, what's happening? And I never realized you got to move it really quickly. And the only thing I had like that for Axiom Verge 2 was I accidentally skipped past one of the cutscene or one of the text scenes after I got a new, I think the grapple for the drone. And I didn't realize
Mm-hmm.
how to attach on to something. You have to hold it down. And once I looked it up, I felt really stupid. So I was like, oh man, I should have been able to figure that out. But that was it. That, and there was one section that I kept not running to the bottom of the screen where there was just an open cave to another section. And for whatever reason, my eyes never thought, hey, try looking down there. So I looked at a playthrough and saw it. But I guess the point of me rambling with that is both of the things that I felt like I needed to cheat on were totally my fault. Whereas there's a couple of games where I've looked things up before and go, how the hell would I have ever known that? Where was the clue? I mean, this is like old NES style of confusing, and I definitely didn't get that. I was stuck real bad in the first Axiom Verge to the point where I did not want to cheat, so I walked away. I came back a couple days later, and then I realized it was one of those things like with 2 where I just, missed a path. But that, I can't imagine how challenging that must be, because as the developer, you know where everything is. So, what kind of challenge is it, and how did you try to make it flow the way that it did, so that people could just find their way eventually without, without having to find it
Uh,
through?
yeah, it's developing it is kind of like playing through like a maze yourself, because uh, yeah, like that kind of like funneling the player to the place where you want them to go. That's I think for me that's like the hardest part of level design, especially with Axiom Verge 2 where there's the two worlds and they overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean that was incredibly difficult, and I I don't know if I really have like advice for how to handle that other than like I have a lot of tricks where I try to make it obvious to the player they want to get there. So like I'll put like a non-essential bonus item like in view of the player. Like, you know, anytime when someone was playtesting the game, they were like, I didn't know what to do, and I find that like it was just that they never, went to the upper left of a room or something like that. So I'd go and put like a glowing flask or something in that part, or put like an actual like light object, like, you know, shining the light on something that I wanted the players to see. Uh, and yeah, it's a difficult thing, And I think the map for Axiom Verge 2, because I made it so that the whole thing can be filled out, it introduced a lot of problems for me, and that um, now the map is basically one big uh, like entity, as opposed to most Metroidvanias where it's like a bunch of little hallways surrounded by black. So it made it less easy to tell like what things connected to which and which ones were actually blocked off.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, I had a lot of work trying to do that. I don't think there's an easy explanation for how to make it work.
Yeah, well, it did, so it was pretty impressive. Now, when you were saying things like you were putting visual cues in the room, one weird problem I have is I'm a very strange type of color blindness. I've taken the test a million times. I always rate the same thing, and so like the Crayola 8 looks, I could see that perfectly. I could see red and blue and all that. I'm not the standard color blindness, and it actually oddly helps when I'm doing the retro gaming stuff, because limited color palettes, I tend to see sharpness better. So, it helps
Mhm.
for what I do for a living. But when I'm playing modern games, very often I'll get to a part and I'll have such a hard time navigating the screen. And I didn't. There were like a few very small things, but I was impressed overall about how the color palette was used in a way where it was nice. It looked good. It wasn't simple by any means, but I didn't really get that sense of what the heck is in this room. Is this my color blindness messing with me? Is that something that you took into account at all? Are you slightly colorblind, and that's why you're able to make it safe for colorblind people? Or
Uh, no, I'm not, but I did try to make it so that the the game was more reliant on the shapes of things, as opposed to the color that they were. And I also tried to make more use of light versus dark in signaling to players what is significant and what is not. So like the higher contrast, brighter things are usually the things that you should stand on or you can interact with, whereas like the low contrast, darker things are more meant to be background. Um, and I think I did that more than I did with Axiom Verge 1 with than I did that more in Axiom Verge 2 than Axiom Verge 1.
that makes sense. The teleport command too, between or the aspect of it that allows you to go between them, was both really handy and sometimes did make certain sections a little easy because you don't have to hunt back through. Was that always the plan for the second one, or was that something that you kind of just decided as you went?
Um, I'd say I was like a couple of years into development. Um, and like I had originally thought, like maybe I'll have an upper half to the world and lower half, and you can like teleport between them. But then at some point, I was like, well, maybe the thing that I do instead of the secret worlds can be this other second layer world. And so from the time that I was actually like programming the game on, I had always had that that two worlds mechanic built in there. Um, I didn't like initially. I didn't realize how confusing and difficult it could be to do it. So like in my first go around, um, you would get more of the alternate world traversing abilities sooner. But that meant that you could teleport out of the breach world, and into the wrong spot or into a place where it would take you a really long time to get back to where you were. So I kind of had to revise it to like do a pretty slow build up of getting the abilities to traverse into the breach and out, um, and like giving you the ability to, in a way you think of like, oh, I can drag the portals wherever I want, but that's actually like a concession to not being able to just enter the breach at any point you want. So the portals are there to restrict where you can enter and exit the breach and make it less likely that the player is going to um, put them in a spot where it takes them forever to get to where they need to be or get soft locked somewhere.
That makes sense. And that also, now that I think about it, the ability to teleport between the different save points came about the same time as when you could exit the breach at any time. And I could now, that makes sense, because there were a few times that I probably exited to a spot that I wouldn't have been able to get out of if I didn't have
Yeah.
that. But it was mostly not like that, because a few times I tried to make it a point to not do that unless I had a distinct goal in mind. Like, oh, I just spent 10 minutes running across the wrong side of the map. Let me go to the other one. I like, just, no right or wrong. I just personally liked to walk through to see, all right, I got extra stuff. I'm getting used to this new game mechanic. What else could I find? Is there a different section of the room? So I found myself bouncing back and forth between save points with the auto teleport a lot less. But I did jump in and out of the breach as much as I could, just to kind of see what other sections I can get to and what wasn't just required to progress in the game, but how could I manipulate that to get that extra item or to get all those the extra stuff. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Another thing that I just thought of, that made it more complex was that in the beginning of the game, when you throw your drone and you have like the drone is a separate character from the player, I had to like really work hard to make sure that when the drone got through traveling in the breach, it came out in a place where they were nearby the body of the character.
Yeah.
Um, and that was, and there were like bugs and stuff where you would die in the breach and then like somehow end up in like some save point like way before like whatever the player last saved is the drone, like in another part of the world that was not the same place they saved when they were the human. And yeah, that was really challenging to get that to work and took a lot of trial and error.
Hmm. Now, I remember when the game first launched, you had released a bug fix for it almost immediately. But I was actually moving at the same time that the game was released, so I first played it after the patches. Um, what were and I'm sorry if you've already posted publicly about this or something, but what were the fixes that you implemented? And you made a comment about Nintendo taking a lot longer to implement their patches and upload them. Could you talk a little bit about what that's like for any indie dev out there that might be about to go through the same thing?
Um, yeah, I'm opening up my Visual Studio so I can see what I put for the patch notes. The patching system it's completely different on different platforms. Like um, Steam and Epic Games, like they totally don't care what you do. You could put in a patch that breaks everything, and it doesn't matter to them. Like you'll find out because people will be mad at you right away. Um, but they won't do like quality control on your game or anything. Um, uh, Sony has a thing where like your first submission of the game requires the full QA process, and then patches that you do after that can be done like can be approved in like a half hour or something really quick like that. Um, but for Nintendo, it's it seems almost as if every patch needs to go through the whole QA process. So um, it can be a couple of weeks. Uh, like even if you feel like you did something simple, like at the moment, I broke the Russian language translation of Axiom Verge 1, and I'm waiting for them to approve. I've been waiting for, I don't know, like at least a week for that to go through. And uh, all I did was to fix it was to change uh, the bitmap file that has the Russian characters on it. Um, so it's like to approve that one file, they still need to like play through the whole game, make sure the whole game works.
Jeez. And that's
Uh,
the QA testing
and
that they do. They don't force you to do that and submit the results. They do it themselves.
they do it. Yeah, they want you to do it too. Um, but yeah, they do it themselves. So it's it probably contributes to the like mind share of Nintendo being higher quality, but it also makes things take longer to get fixed when something does go wrong. All right, so I'm trying to where I put my see where I put the
I only asked
patches.
about what changes were made because I didn't run into a single bug in the entire game, and I've played plenty of games on the Switch that were just. I mean, I forgot which game. Owlboy, I think, crashed like every 5 minutes. Like crashed, not just small little bugs. And I didn't get that at all with either. Actually, with all three playthroughs, I didn't find any bugs in any of the
Uh,
systems.
I did. I mean, I did have a number of people playtesting the game before, like speedrunners that had worked on the Axiom Verge 1 randomizer. And they're pretty thorough when it comes to finding things that halt the game. They won't let you know if they find something that lets them speedrun it faster. Uh, but, things that could affect most players, um, they tended to find that out. And there's some bugs that I just didn't fix because they amuse me. Um, so let's see. There's a soft lock where if you like I guess when you're underwater, there was a soft lock that you could make a jump and end up in a place that you can never get out of. Um, there was a place where if you run out of nano points, there was no way to uh, be able to like blow up the bricks that are like locking you into a certain area. And there were some issues with the animation where the animation would like go nuts after a certain point in the game if you never like saved and restarted. And I fixed those on the first day it was out, um, or I had them fixed for the first day it was out. I don't know if I think it probably took a while for that to get approved. Um,
That's cool. It's funny because some
so
older games, I distinctively remember finding bugs like that where it's like, well, I guess I got to hit reset because I'm stuck here, or I guess I got to go back to the last save point or something like that. So it's a very big advantage of modern stuff is being able to have that. And do you know if the physical editions, I'm assuming, will have the very latest version of the game? Correct.
yeah, yep.
I'd like to talk about that for a minute too, because you have a couple of really nice physical versions of the games. I loved the multiverse edition of the original one, and Limited Run Games has a bunch of different packages of everything from that super collector's edition with the vinyl audio and and all of the different stuff, the tchotchkes in there, all the way to just a very basic copy of Axiom Verge 1 and 2 on a single disc or cart or something like that. What's your thoughts on physical media versus digital? The whole preservation aspect on all of that, or do you not really have an opinion?
Um, I mean, it's like I think it's cool for me. It's more about like uh, just like that nostalgia of being like, oh, like this is like when I played games as a kid, and they came in a box with like a map and an instruction manual, um, and maybe some other stuff for me to like kind of like toy around with, and like fantasize about the game world before I even play it. Um, but it's not something like I don't buy a lot of collector's editions on my
Mhm.
own. You know, um, I do like it, like getting the stuff that comes with collector's editions for Axiom Verge 1 and 2, because then I get to have it too, and like I get little toys and stuff that I can put on the shelf that look cool to me. Um, uh, I think it's good that there is there's a number of people all interested in preserving games and making sure there's a physical version of things, because who knows what's going to happen to Steam and the PlayStation Store, and the Nintendo Store. Is that stuff going to disappear? Um, and am I going to have to keep on making new versions of Axiom Verge for future platforms because they're no longer backwards compatible with the previous
Mhm.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I kind of wish that there was some kind of like central repository of games where the game was like always there for all time, and you bought it once and you owned on everything. Uh, Maybe someone will come up with a way to make that happen, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, I agree. I have such mixed feelings because the ease of digital games is so awesome, but once a platform goes down, it's gone forever. And I know a lot of dirty pirates, and I mean that in a nice way, who rip and archive all of this stuff, and they don't share them, and they sure as hell don't sell them. That's not even a gray area. That's just a giant piece of crap who would do that. But it's kind of a weird thing because you archive all of this stuff, and when do you feel like it's okay to share? If you're sharing an Atari 2600 ROM that hasn't, the cartridge hasn't been made in 40 years, it's kind of a good thing. The word gets out there, more people talk
Yeah,
about it. If somebody wants to make a new digital edition, they could do that, and now
right.
there's more people with interest. But I sure as heck wouldn't want to see a ROM of Axiom Verge 2 pop up.
Yeah, yeah. There was a time in like the late '90s, early 2000s when it didn't seem like publishers really cared about like ROMs, or weren't really doing anything about it. And there were ROM sites that were basically like giant library encyclopedias with like reviews and descriptions of like every single game ever made. And you could just like look at them and be like, oh, this looks cool, and like download it and play it for free. And that was amazing. And I feel like uh, it's it's kind of a shame that that's gone, like for you know particularly for like older games that like no one's ever going to play again unless it exists in that form. So I don't know. I hope somebody comes up with a solution that's elegant and isn't something that can be taken down for legal reasons, or uh, because they just aren't profitable enough anymore.
Yeah, and I hope the digital versus hard copy thing somehow there's a better solution for that too. Because in the situation of this, so if you buy the hard copy of it, it's going to have the bug fixes implemented. But if you bought a brand new game that was released in stores on day one, and there's been 5 patches over the lifetime of the game, 10 years from now, if I pick up a Switch, plug in the game, the only option I might have is the original buggy version without any of the fixes, which sometimes could be
Right.
good, sometimes could be bad. I wish there was some way to get around that. I also wish there was some way, respectfully, I don't mean anything bad by this, but that I wish there was some way I didn't have to buy the game twice, because I totally want a hard copy of the game. But that's exactly what I'm doing. I bought it directly from the Nintendo shop, and then I just pre-ordered through limited run games as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There isn't really a good, you know, uh, maybe there could be something that someone makes a central repository, a Carfax for games, and you can see who owns the VIN of your particular game. And like once you have that VIN, now you own all versions of it. I think that's for someone else to work out how that is going to happen. I'm all for it though if it does.
Yeah. This might be kind of a more general and stupid question, but if somebody has the digital download on PlayStation 4 or Switch and they buy the physical version and plug in the physical version, will they get their access to their old save files, or will the physical version create a different save game?
It'll be the same files. The thing that's different is when the publisher is different, and that's what happened with the Badlands version of the Switch, because it was published by Badlands. It's actually got a different like SKU number to it. So the physical Axiom Verge 1 and the digital Axiom Verge 1 um, weren't compatible. But the new physical Axiom Verge 1 that we're making now uh, should be compatible with all the digital Axiom Verge 1s.
Okay,
So,
that's cool. That's I'm glad that you guys put some thought into that, because that was the only other thing that would have frustrated me, and it makes sense. As far as all the extra stuff that comes in these collector's editions, how much of a like how big of a role do you play in what stuff is included and what they come up with, and or is it just your distribution place says, hey, here, how about this idea? Would you like us to throw this in for you?
we have meetings like with like limited run. Jeremy Parrish is like my contact over there, who basically, like, together with him and Dan Edelman, we decided everything that's going to be in those collector's editions. And I mean, they're the experts in that kind of thing, like as to like what people want and what's going to be the most popular. So we listen to them, but then there are suggestions. Like, it was my suggestion we have a shadow box in there because I like shadow
Me too.
boxes. Um, and and like I really wanted there to be like a double-sided map or something with two maps in it. So like that's going to be in there. And then there's things like that I had never heard of before, but like limited run was like, oh yeah, Chirashi. It's these like little letter-sized like posters that are really popular among otaku, I guess. And so so that that those ended up in there and they look really cool. Um, yeah, and like everything that they do, I didn't design anything new for it myself, but everything they designed, they like showed to me, and like I gave them my approval, or said like oh, like this part looks weird, like you're looking at Trace from behind instead of the front, like can you get the artist to make a version of him from the front? And they go back and they change that.
That's pretty cool. So that's good. It doesn't all fall on your shoulders to try to figure out how to manufacture, all those little different things. It's good that it's kind of a team like that. And I actually know Jeremy pretty well, so he seems like a good person to be put on that.
Yeah. I would think he's also very into like the capture like scene, like the RGB CRT, like hookups, and getting everything to come out perfectly clear for his. He does a lot of those videos.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. So at the end of the game, it kind of was a teaser that there's going to be a third game, possibly. Is that something that you've talked about? Have you decided if there's going to be an Axiom Verge 3, or did you kind of just leave it?
Yeah, I mean there pretty much has to be a third one to like have the first two make any sense. So we'll see if I have the throughput to do that immediately, or if I need to like take a break and make another game. But it's safe to assume that I'm going to be working on Axiom Verge 3 at some point.
That's pretty cool. Do you have anything in mind? Any differences? A different look? A different idea, or is it just still like all
Uh,
on the table?
it's kind of like all on the table. I, I'm thinking uh, the third one might have more of a maybe a survival horror feel to it than the second one did. Not because people were asking for something darker, but just because that's what I feel like fits into the story that I've got. Um, but yeah, like everything else is kind of it's up in the air until uh, I'm in basically like what do you call it, like pre-production or discovery phase. I'm trying to figure out what I even want to do.
Yeah. And hopefully by that time the Switch Pro will be out and you could have it scaled directly to 4K like the other versions.
Yeah, that would be neat. Hopefully there is a Switch Pro and those are not just rumors.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Nintendo really is capitalizing on the portable aspect of it, which is I understand because I think that's a giant part of their user base, but I love just playing on a TV and I almost never connect it.
Yeah,
Like I was just playing before just to kind of re-immerse myself in the game before we talked, and I think that's the only time I've ever played Axiom Verge in portable mode ever was just now kind of walking
yeah,
around, listening to the music, getting a feel again. So,
yeah. I would definitely like it if it would be backwards compatible with the current Switch, whatever their next thing is. And even better if it could upres Metroid Dread and whatnot to 4K, Zelda in 4K. That would be nice.
yeah, Metroid Dread looks so good, but at the same time, all I could see is like, wow, this doesn't feel like a brand new thing that I should be playing on a 4K OLED TV. Like, it's a gorgeous game, but I wish it was out in 4K not that it would make the game better, but it certainly would look a little bit cooler.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, it's just one of those things that makes you happy to see things in the, crispest, cleanest way they can look.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was awesome. I was really excited to get to talk to you, and I'll be buying all the games that you make. So maybe we could have this chat again when Axiom Verge 3 is coming out.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. I look forward to
Thank
it.
you very much for your time, and I will leave links to where to follow you on social media, as well as, of course, where to buy the physical editions of Axiom Verge 1 and 2. And as far as digital editions, at the moment, it's PC, Switch, PlayStation 4, with PlayStation 5 coming probably in 2022, right?
Yeah. Like it would really be awesome if somehow it could be out in 2021, but we're in October now. So I think it's unlikely for that to happen.
Cool. Well, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it, and please don't stop making these awesome games that we all love.
All right. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.